with Copycat, we've been able to take, the kind of bones of machine learning where it says, I give you, you give it some reference of, I want to turn this image into this image, and then it goes away and trains how to do that and it can apply that. But it does it in a kind of artist focused context. There are people out there who are, born to be creatives or born to be designers. It is their passion and the thing they're really driven to do. I am not one of them. To be honest, quite a mediocre designer, I would say, but really good at setting direction, organizing a team towards a goal, working towards achieving things together. We're opening up the ability to use models that were trained outside of Nuke. So you can use open source PyTorch models that are generated in the community inside Nuke. Really, if you're someone that has knowledge of Nuke, Maya, Katana, Mari, anything, you have a lot more career options, right, than working only in a studio. And yeah, definitely, whether that's product management or other things, there's a lot of job opportunities out there in the kind of technology space.
Hi, I'm Daniel Mark Miller with the VFX Artists podcast, and this week we're talking to Christy Anzelmo of Foundry. She's Chief Product Officer, so if you use any Foundry products such as Nuke or Mari or Modo, then you're going to get some really interesting insights into how they prioritize the development of those softwares, how they work at Foundry, and how this stuff that we use every day gets made. We're also going to find out about her career. She actually started in fashion design, so there's some really interesting surprises there. And we also talk about the possibility for VFX artists who may wish to move on to software development and working with creating the products that create the images. So there's some really cool stuff. We also get to talk about USD and machine learning. So there's some fascinating insights here, and I think it would be really valuable. So sit back, grab a tea or coffee, and let's get started. Hi. Hi, Christy.
Hey, Daniel.
So, how you doing?
Doing all right. It's exciting to be talking to you today.
It's really
Yeah.
good to have you on the show, actually, finally. Um, so, okay, so for those that don't know, you obviously are product manager at Foundry, not the. It was the Foundry when it.
Yes, it is. It was the Foundry. It's now Foundry.
Because all the films are going the other way. They're going like Batman, the Batman.
Yes, we went for less, fewer words and more direct than more articles, I guess.
Yeah. So let's start with that. Like, how did you get into VFX, and how did you become product manager at Foundry?
Yeah, sure. So let's see. So I'm currently the chief product officer at Foundry officially. So with this, I do look after product management and product design for all of the products at Foundry. Of course, it's a pretty large team now of people that know much more about the individual products and things than I do, but I do get to work across all of them. And before this role, which I've only been in since July this year, so it's quite new, I was the director of product looking after the Nuke family. So been at Foundry 6.5 years, primarily looking after Nuke, but now looking after everything. But I think my background is probably a bit unique compared to other people that you've talked to, in that I don't come from VFX. Foundry is my first VFX role. And I actually started my career in product design. So I started out product management because the company I worked for was full of those super creative fashion designers that really had a great vision for what they wanted to build, but were really struggling with understanding how to accomplish their vision and how to make a successful business from it. So kind of fell into it then.
So they had to get. So I just to try and straighten out what you were actually doing. I'll close some of the windows that are in my way. But so just to kind of get an idea, the fashion designer, for example, is ordering material and things like that, and then they're ordering and they're assembling the stuff and sending it out and responding to orders, and you were just making sure that they, didn't, for example, use acres of silk that they couldn't afford for the price they were selling it at, and that they could source all the materials they were sending, and that they could supply the orders that they said they could supply, and that the turnaround times were reasonable again for what they were selling and the price they were selling. Is that kind of an accurate description of what you were doing?
Mostly that. I think, yeah, take for granted people that haven't worked in fashion probably don't realize how much goes into the design process. Like how many, um, I think how many different colors of t-shirt do we need in our product line this year? Long sleeves, short sleeves, crew necks, v-necks, cotton, organic cotton. What do we need to, design so that we can, have what our customers want, we can advance our brand, we can, build our business. And it's usually more creative than just t-shirts that you're working on. And actually, my kind of day to day as a designer was closer to CAD design. So I used, obviously spent most of the day drawing, I think you could just say. And I did a lot of surface design work, so pattern design and knitwear design using Adobe Illustrator, using some fashion industry specific software, like from like Electra, Kaleido, or Modaris. People that work in fashion will know those. They're like big softwares. And actually at university, I learned AutoCAD because somehow my university was way ahead of the curve and thought we needed to learn how to design clothing in 3D. So, um, coming back to my path, I wish someone at, at school would have told me about VFX as a career, because not a great designer of fashion, but really good at CAD. So I think I missed that kind of path I could have gone.
While you were still in fashion, you moved into product management. Is that right?
Yeah,
Is that
exactly. And then that was more like what you said. So um, working on, we used to call it merchandising. So planning, we need to have, we're going to make 20 products in our product line. We need to have 3 black tops and 3 red tops and 2 purple tops, that kind of thing. And then working, like you said, with the design team and the product design team to make sure that we're not being inefficient and saying, of our 3 red tops, they're all 3 different colors of red, different materials, because it's more expensive to produce them. And are we really going to sell them all? That kind of thing. Um, I also learned a lot about supply chains and import export businesses and all of those things. Because yeah.
I actually worked in a aquascutum, similar, not quite the
Oh
same
no,
role, but like
yeah,
supplying the shops, and it was the kind of customer service, but supplying the shops. So it's funny when you're talking all this stuff. It's like, yeah, I mean, it was 20 years ago or so,
yeah.
but I do kind of remember some of this stuff.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. Really, it's had not changed so much, right? And that's really one of the things that took me away from fashion, is that it's, I think now there's like a bit of a renaissance in design and this 3D, like move towards 3D transformation, and seeing a lot more 3D tools come in to fashion design, which is really exciting for a lot of reasons. Um, but at the time, so this was like mid 2000s, it just felt like the innovation wasn't happening. You're doing the same things over and over every season. It just wasn't that interesting. And yeah.
I was going to say that Foundry has a product that I've never used because it's not a VFX product, but it's a not fashion design, but it's a product design product. That it does that have a connection to the way you were thinking about these things? I can't remember what it's called now, but
Yeah,
I've seen that
yes.
they had the advert of designing like an espresso machine, like the demo, and they were changing the colors of the tabs and things. You know what I mean? You know what?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. So we have, Foundry has 2 products that are used in digital like product design now. And well, one is Modo, right, which is a modeling tool, which also used in VFX, but used even more in product design. And it's quite good when you're working creatively and with organic shapes and that kind of thing. So it's used a lot by accessories designers or packaging designers, that kind of thing.
Right. And is that also good because it's good for when you're actually manufacturing it rather than rendering it? Is that?
Um, not, it's really more like currently the use case is more on the design side. So when you're quickly testing out ideas and trying out different versions of those ideas, which um, the ability to kind of try a lot of different versions and see them all laid out together is what led to creation of Colorway, which is probably the one that you saw, which is a product I wish that I had when I was doing design, especially product management and design, because you know, like in our t-shirt example where you say it's a product line that's going to have 20 items in it, you might go through 200 or 300 different iterations. Like, show me what it looks like with 3 black ones, with 4 black ones, with all long sleeves, short sleeves. Like, show me all the varieties that are possible, and let me lay them out like in my catalog or my mocked up store or even just my merchandising plan to see that it all makes sense. It's the right combination that I want. And Colorway makes that really easy because it links your models to this kind of 2D layout view and lets people that are not 3D artists, I should say, like those product managers like me, go through and tweak materials and colors and versions and build different colorways and see how they all look together to help in that design and design review process.
Because I think that's all. I mean, VFX and fashion all have this thing in common that you've got these creative people that have to then ultimately show stuff to business people. I mean, and I mean, maybe in film you're still dealing with directors and so on, but at some point, it gets shown to execs and people that aren't necessarily like artists or designers. And in advertising, obviously, there's like account managers and people like that who have a very business background, and they can. If they might decide what they like when they see it, but they can't imagine things.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, one of the things that's been really exciting, again, like in recent years in fashion, is the move towards being able to make those, design and purchasing decisions based on the digital representations. So whether that's models or things that are rendered out as images and colorway, um, that saves a lot of time in the design process and a lot of waste. Like we think, it used to be when I was doing it, right, you needed to make multiple rounds of physical sample garments. People wouldn't place an order without having a physical garment in front of them. And the amount of like shipping back and forth to the Far East, the amount you'd spend on, samples that were just going to be most likely thrown away in the end is crazy, right? It's hugely wasteful. So being able to get really accurate, 3D CAD representations, a nice way to review them, giving a buyer confidence that they're going to get their order is going to look like what they saw. It really saves a ton of time and a ton of waste, from the system. It's quite exciting.
So now, so most of your career at Foundry, you actually were working with Nuke, and so dealing with compositing. So when you started, you didn't know anything about compositing, but I guess quickly you had to learn everything about compositing, right? Like, so how did that go?
Yeah, no, definitely. Is it well, I say I was super lucky to join Foundry and to start working on Nuke from the very beginning because it's an amazing tool, really. And um, I don't think I didn't know what I was getting into at the start, but it's really, really incredible. And yeah, so I joined Foundry in 2015, March of 2015. My first release was Nuke 9.0 V5, which was when we launched Nuke non-commercial. So that was super exciting to come into.
Yeah, and
Um,
also fixed all the bugs that had been in
we,
9.0.
we fixed some of them. I think we did a few more releases to fix the majority. But yes, I can say I came after, when we were on the downward slope of fixing bugs. Um, but yeah, so I just definitely had to learn a lot. But I found, everyone at Foundry was really helpful, and there were lots of people that would answer all of my questions. But also, just in the industry, everyone I talked to was really, happy to teach me things and explain what they're doing and how they're working. And I never felt like I couldn't ask a question about how something worked or why things are done one way, not another. And everyone was all, very welcoming and supportive in that way.
VFX is very small and very close knit, and I think people don't realize, like, because it's big and you see all these credits, but then you realize, like, very quickly you kind of know it, like everyone, or if you don't know everyone directly, you know someone that knows them, right? At some point, like you're like Kevin Bacon to everyone
Yeah.
in the industry within a very
That's
very
true.
short
Like
amount of
the
time.
degrees of separation are very, very small, right? And that's actually, we met, didn't we, in 2015? You were in the first client-facing meeting I did at Foundry when I first got. It was the first one. It was the first one, and I don't remember much about it except that I think we were talking about probably Aces and OpenColor.io because that was
It
right
was more like
after Aces came out, right? Just like 6 months before, and we were working on supporting it.
Nuke Indie, which I think took longer than that, and it was kind of the conversation and some of the other people there, to me, but some of the other people there were quite passionate because obviously at one point you want to take features out because you want to sell it at a lower price point, and at the other point, we want everything and it's too expensive. So everyone is doing something, and obviously that is a big part of, I guess, your role, right? Everyone wants everything, and you've got to make decisions about what they get and what they don't, and where to put your resources. I mean, when that could be features, that could be price points, that could be different versions. And I think Nuke is interesting because, I mean, I guess your user base is much bigger than your client base, in a sense that most of your clients are mostly VFX houses, and with Nuke Indie, you're starting to get, I guess, more artists buying Nuke themselves. But the majority of your Nuke users have never bought a Nuke license. I mean, I would probably argue that
Yes. Yeah.
90% of Nuke users have never bought a Nuke license in their lives. So, what does that mean? Because obviously you're getting feedback from users, but they're not the people ultimately making the decision whether or not to buy a license.
Yeah.
How does that affect the way you respond to your clients, I guess?
Yes, that's right. You were in the first focus group we did on Nuke Indie, and then we actually released a Nuke Indie 5 years later. So there you go. Sometimes it takes a while, um, but it's yeah. No, I think one of the fun things about working on Nuke actually as a product manager is the diversity of the user base, and because it's not just artists versus pipelines versus management, right? Who's actually going to pay for things, but also when you think about the different kinds of work and the different kinds of jobs that people do in Nuke, right? Whether you're working on a big, dune, really a massive VFX, but a real VFX feature, or animation or commercial, you may have different requirements, right? So there's a lot to consider about um, balancing everyone's needs together. And yeah.
So, did you actually have to learn to use Nuke? I was curious if they actually sat you in front of one and had you drive it for a bit, or
um well, so I could say I'm definitely not a compositor. If you said
no.
like comp the shot, I would fail quite quickly. But I, over the years, have learned to use Nuke quite a bit. It wasn't a requirement in my like the first set of work I was doing, but it's something I picked up anyway, just doing tutorials here and there. And of course, my strategy was when there's a new feature or a new area that we're adding, just go play with it and see how it works. And over time, kind of built up that I think I could get through the basics now, but I'm definitely not an expert. Luckily, there are many other people at Foundry who know much more about Nuke and how it's used than I do, who bring that into the team.
So, what is your team? So, let's start, I guess, with your Nuke team because that's belonging, and then we'll talk about your new role, I guess, and move into that. So, what is the Nuke team? So you're leading it as the not called product manager. You were called something else at the time.
Oh, yes, yeah, the director of product, right? That one, which is a like higher up product manager, but yeah, product management. Yeah.
And then so you've got people. So under you, you've got like one,
hmm
and he's specifically Nuke Studio, and then I guess you've got someone more for Nuke X.
Yeah. So let's see. So there are quite a few of us, right? So we have, um, yeah, like I was looking after all of Nuke, so direction for all of Nuke and Flix as well, actually, which is another Foundry product all about storyboarding. And yeah, so I was looking after all of those. And then we had, yeah, Juan, who was really leading the direction for Nuke Studio and Hero, but also working with Flix and, of course, doing quite a lot on the Nuke side as well. He's got a lot of great experience and, um, well, in the industry and at Foundry, so he does quite a lot of things. Then we have David Nolan, who's working on the Nuke and Nuke X side, specializing in performance. And we have um, really a whole team of other product managers that work with them. So it's quite a big team now. I think we're almost 10 of us looking across everything. But when you think about the work that product management does, I think that's just probably interesting because a lot of your audience probably doesn't know what product management does, other than they're people that come and present roadmaps at your studio of what's coming next. So, really, the way I see the role of product is matching, bringing in the voice of the customer and matching that to the business goals and working out the strategy for the product, but then taking that strategy and really being the one that's working towards delivery. So, of course, that's working really closely in partnership with engineering, the people that are actually writing code and doing the development of the software, but really with any team that's involved with delivery. So, you know, DevOps and business systems and sales and marketing and customer support and everything else, right? Whatever you need, that voice of the customer and that sense of priority. So in that sense, it's quite broad and quite exciting, the role. And so yeah.
Because you've got so on your team you've got engineers, artists, product managers who are in a similar. I guess they're just you would say the same role at a lower level than yourself. Um, and would you say it's a good balance between those spheres of knowledge, or
Yeah, well, I think so. Let's see. So on the product management team, it's a real mix of people that have come into the business from being compositors, so coming from the industry. And actually, I'm hiring a new person right now. So this sounds like something you know what to do. Definitely come and apply. But yeah, so we do have some people that came from being compositors who are Nuke specialists. Like they know a lot about Nuke and how it's used, and they're really motivated to improve Nuke for all the artists they know, right, in the industry and trying to make it better for them. We also have quite a few people that move from other roles in the company, so that have come from customer support or QA or product design into product management to have more of a kind of impact on our priorities and the kind of work that we're doing. So it's, yeah, and then a couple people like me, right, who come from product management, not necessarily in VFX, to add the kind of product strategy expertise. So it's quite varied. And we are, compared to the engineering teams, we're actually quite a small team. There's many, many more engineers to product managers, but we are the ones that are trying to set the strategy and manage the priorities across all the work that we're doing.
so? I guess anyone that uses you get those questionnaires that say like what which feature on a value of 1 to 5 would you like, and this and when you get that data, what do you do with it? Like do you because at some point you're gonna actually I guess decide to make something or not make something.
Yeah.
So are there things that you think you thought you would want to make and then no one really wanted them and you just didn't bother and you put all your energies into something else? And are there things that maybe you never thought people would want and then they're like, we really want this and this is our priority more than anything else, more than the thing you thought was cool?
Yeah, definitely. So I guess to answer your question about the survey first. So the survey, I have to say thank you to everyone that fills in the survey because it's actually a really important data point for us. And I know some of the questions seem a bit like you wonder why are we asking, or it's really long, right? Because it's really what we use the survey for is to validate a lot of like information that we've heard, anecdotally in customer meetings and maybe our own sense of what's interesting. And using the survey can go to many more people than we could ever meet with. And so it gives us some nice data points on what's important to people that we haven't gotten the chance to speak to. So thank you again, everyone. And my favorite part of the survey is actually the comments. The people write in is always I think the most telling, because usually it's the thing we've forgotten to think about or that we thought wasn't important, and it's like, oh, actually it's this is the Linux distribution, or this is the feature I really need. Just fix this bug. It's this bug. Go fix it. Those kind of things.
Can you give a specific example of that, where something you've done because it came up in the comments and you weren't even thinking of it before?
Oh, that's a good question. I have to really think back. Probably one of the ones that came up from the survey that we ended up taking on was merging the spherical transform nodes from Nuke and Cara VR. That one came up many, many times. Of why are there two different ones? Can't you make it the same? Put them together, where really under the hood they're doing totally different things. So they worked in very different ways. But we got there, and I think it was in Nuke 12 where we combined them together, 12 or 12.1, after Cara VR merged into Nuke X. Yeah.
That's also quite a big decision, right? Because at one point you were selling Cara as quite a price, quite a high priced product, and then you're like, okay, now it's just part of Nuke. So how do you, what makes you do that kind of thing? Like, what's the logic to that?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different reasons that we might do that. There's a bit of, demand and kind of market life cycle. And something like Cara VR is a good example where, we released it in 2016, was right in the heyday of 360 video, going to be the future, right? 360 video, we're all going to wear headsets all the time, and this is it. And it did really great. Like, it was one of the first bespoke, 360 video tool sets that was out on the market. So it's, was used quite a lot and quite popular. But then as the appetite for 360 video started to decline, once we got over the VR hype cycle and everything, just less interest in VR and 360 video, the value of that tool set really diminished. But we knew there's a lot of really valuable things in there for traditional compositing, for cleanup and color matching and creating lat longs and reviewing them for other kinds of location-based experiences, or even preparing backgrounds for virtual production. And so, we saw we didn't want to let the tool set die, even though its kind of niche had really gone away. And so we decided to move it into Nuke X to keep those workflows alive and make it more accessible really to anyone that could use those tools.
And because I think I just was just yesterday talking to Joe from the Cave Academy, and he mentioned that I think ClearAngle they've got a system of using Nuke in a way that I've never heard of Nuke being used, of having like 12 reds and doing 360s live, and sort of doing a live composite with Nuke, which must be on a ridiculous machine, I don't know, but
yeah.
and so there are people that do stuff with Nuke that is really like unusual. There are obviously the customers that do the kind of bread and butter work, but every now and again there's someone using Nuke in a way that maybe no one else is using it, and I think that's really quite interesting. Do you get those stories?
Absolutely.
Is there any other things you remember where you're like, you can do that with Nuke? Like, you do that?
Oh yeah. Oh, there's a bunch of those. Well, I think there's definitely a lot of uses for Nuke in architecture and architecture visualization that you wouldn't expect, which is quite cool. That comes from Nuke's ability to handle really high resolutions and to export stills and video at the same time, so you can save a lot of effort.
because when I worked at McCann, like the print guys would come down, they obviously were all Photoshop users, and then they'd see what we could do with Nuke, and they'd get like, they were like, but this is really amazing. Like, they were, what we were doing was, we had a big CG render, and it was odd because, and then they could have, even the stuff they could do in Photoshop, they just came down just to see how we would do it, and they would just kind of make us like change the passes and things. It's like, I could give you the passes. No, we're fine. It's just like, what?
just do it here.
Like, just like, how do these, what is all this spaghetti stuff, like what's going on?
Yeah.
So
that another thing that I think is really cool I've seen in a couple different forms is car configurators. So yeah, like there are a couple of people out there where, like, I can't say who they are, but they will do things like using all deep, so render all the different components to make a model of a car, and then have some complex switching system in their Nuke script to put them together in different formats. So to say, like, give me, the version with the sport mirrors and the chrome and the no chrome, and yeah, to basically configure different cars as part of a design process.
yeah, it makes sense because people use them in car commercials all the time, and they do exactly that. I mean, I have invented exactly that for a long time. So if you do it car commercial, you can just do it if you're buying a car. Yes, I mean,
Yeah,
if you're
exactly.
selling
Render
enough
it
cars, it's
once.
worth a Nuke license.
Yeah, that's it. Render it once and just tweak it in Nuke automatically, without, you know, not with a compositor, but yeah, just through procedurally. It's really cool.
The car sitting in the garage in the lot that's not selling is a lot of money, right?
Yes. And visualizing all the options too, right? When you think about all the different possible combos you can get on a car these days, it's a lot, right, of options. So the more you can swap them out quickly to show someone what it would look like, it's valuable.
And I guess car is an extreme example, but there are lots of things like that, like the camera tracker. So for smaller companies where I've worked, the camera tracker is so useful. And then on the other hand, for the bigger companies that have a match move department and they're being given cameras, you almost never touch it, and it's a sort of like, it's not a useful feature at all. And so you've got these customers who, for one of them, a feature is, like a core part of, like, that's what they want Nuke, and they're like, why are you not updating this? And another company just doesn't care, and they're like, demanding other things. So I mean, I guess it comes down to who's buying the most Nuke licenses.
Well, I think it's a balance, right? And luckily, because, they're, you're right, Nuke is used by, well, all the big studios and by VFX studios of all sizes. But I think, you know, there are the big ones out there, the top 10, top 20. But there's, I think, when you think in your own experience, right, all the small VFX studios around London, around Europe, right, Asia, there's so many companies of different sizes that use Nuke for different things. It's not only the big companies that we need to keep using Nuke. So it's always a balance of, understanding, what's really important for artists, right? The user experience. This is the one thing, like, refreshing the UI, or adding something that's just a user experience improvement. Like in the next release, in Nuke 13.1, we're releasing Shake to Disconnect. So you can shake your nodes, disconnect them like Shake. Which
Like Shake, yeah, which
like
was the
Shake.
first compositor I learned.
It's classic. Yeah.
It didn't have undo, which was, so, like, literally the first to first sell Nuke. Like, literally, I remember the first. I think Tal Niran was doing this demo for Nuke, and he just like was like, and look, Control Z, Control, and that was a feature that people were excited by. Like, it was ridiculous. So we'd been working for years on big things with this product that couldn't do an undo. So,
Undo.
but one of the thing about, I guess, high end software is that at, when it used to be really clunky, all of it was like, it was insanely bad as a UI compared to consumer products, and it was almost like a point of pride that it's hard to use, and you're like, well, yeah, but I get that sometimes we're doing hard things, but why are the easy things hard to do in this software? So I think that's something that's changing, right? It's becoming more of a demand to make the software accessible, and that's no longer a dumbing it down. Oh, why are you doing this? It's
Yeah, no, I think that's very true. And well, I think user experience is the, especially in visual effects and like media entertainment software, user experience is the next, well, one of the next big innovations, because you see a lot, other software and applications and web-based tools that are now so simple, easy to use, really straightforward kind of usage patterns, where you know, still professional software, like you said, is a bit slower, right? And some of that, is because it is hard to use. And like in Nuke, right, one of the kind of key aspects of Nuke, which makes it great, is the ability, to tweak as much as you want, right? And having everything available and all that control, right? Which does make the UI more complex, right? Because we're asking, you as the artist to manipulate and make more decisions, and we're not hiding from you what Nuke is doing. So, yeah.
Any VFX artist will get frustrated with something else, but they're like, but what is it doing? Like that looks great, but now I want to change it. What is it actually doing to me? Like to my images? Like where? It's just a black box, and yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And so there's this kind of tension, right, between the make it easy, make it simple to use, simple to understand, and still give me all the control and expose everything to me and let me make whatever tweaks I want to. And from a design perspective, I think it's quite an interesting challenge, right? To say, how do you have a modern, clean UI, modern interactions without giving away all that visibility of what's happening? And yeah, I think it's quite exciting time actually for design and professional tools in terms of improving the user experience.
Do you look at your right? Do you look at your others? Do you have copies of like I mean, Flame and Fusion and After Effects in the office that you kind of go, oh, let's why don't we do that? Or
Yeah, well, of course, right? From like our product design team, they do take a lot of inspiration from looking at other tools, seeing how things work, looking at well, products in other industries, right, to get ideas as well. So, of course, we're doing that kind of research. And I mean, actually, I think something from that more than looking at experience, like things to copy, it's more thinking about where we can make things consistent. Even within Foundry's own products, right? We're really trying to make an effort where, if we're all going to support the same formats or um, use the same kind of color tools, to think about how we can make them more consistent, because that is something that helps ease of learning, right? Without adding difficulty, right? If, a color picker looks the same everywhere, you don't need to relearn how to use it. Or, if your 3D hotkeys are the same as they are in Nuke and Maya, for example, that's one less thing that you need to learn or to keep in your brain when you're moving between applications.
because a lot of I mean, obviously there are compositors working in Nuke all day, but of course you have a lot of Nuke users who are Houdini artists or Maya artists who use Nuke at least part of the day. Um, so that's an important thing. And another thing I was gonna, so we talk about rival software, but there are lots of softwares like Maya and Houdini which aren't rivals to Nuke. They might be rivals to some of your other product line, but it's pretty much guaranteed that almost every Houdini user also uses Nuke. Every Maya user well, every lighter will use Nuke at some point. So you've got this element of products that are, I guess, competitors to perhaps some of your other line, but at the same time you want Nuke to play well with them, right? You don't want to make it difficult for Houdini users to use Nuke, because that would be a big disaster.
Yeah, no, I think that's yeah, that's a good point to call out, right? And it is, well, I do think we're in an exciting time for the industry in terms of interoperability, and some of that's being led by standards, right? And the Academy Software Foundation and development of more of those consistent ways to understand data and transform it and communicate those changes across applications. But also, with the way that hardware is advanced, moving more to the cloud and making more hardware available, advancements in rendering and GPU and real-time rendering coming in more and more. I think we have a lot of building blocks, right, for less linear pipelines. So being able to, I guess, such a phrase like the nonlinear pipelines, but you know, there's, I think, a real drive around, or a real desire in the industry to improve collaboration between multiple departments, multiple artists, but also to have faster creative iterations,
Yeah.
which that's something that,
Comp can go back into 3D quicker and do the sort of round trip, without restarting an entire cycle. Is it that what you're?
exactly, or the idea of, let's see, if you're going to do like virtual production, or even just just have any kind of virtual art department where you're planning out your scenes, your shots, your sequences in advance, and you might be using things like Mari and Katana and Nuke to help you do that in a kind of quick preview way. um, Let me try to tell this story again from the end. So if like at the end, right, everything is going to come into Nuke, right, for a comp. And of course, like when it comes to interop, already from Nuke, we have to think about all the different inputs that you're going to bring in, whether it's camera plates, EXRs, alembics, USD scenes now, all that has to come into Nuke. And we are seeing Nuke show up much earlier in the process, where it's being used as that reference point from the beginning of the how do we plan how we want this to end up in the end, see it in the context of Nuke, and then go off, work in all these other applications, render, and then you're going to come back to Nuke in the end. And I think that creates a lot of really interesting opportunities for interop. And obviously it's also the promise of USD, right? That you'll be able to go backwards and forwards and maintain a sense of, versioning and control and non-destructive changes within a scene, thanks to that.
Yeah,
And
because the dream would be like if they change anim, it doesn't go back to lighting. Like if you're happy with the lighting and you're happy with the comp, and they just want to adjust
yes,
the animation, the dream would be that they can do that adjustment, and then you just like press update, and it updates the anim cache, and it all kind of pipes through. But it doesn't do that at the moment. But
yes,
that would be cool.
It's a big dream, this one, isn't it? It's a big dream, but it's quite exciting, even if we can do it in a small way, like between, like in map painting, right? If you're going between, a 3D application like, Maya, if you're using Mari, you're using Nuke, or using Photoshop and Nuke, if you're able to have this more kind of direct data interchange between, like, go set up your projections in the comp, save them in a USD, get that back, and automate more of that. That's, I think, quite exciting from an efficiency standpoint.
Absolutely. Um, and then I guess there's also there's a couple of other things I wanted to drop. Just the last thing I guess that specifically Nuke is probably the most interesting new thing is the copycat, because that's quite
Yes.
different. I mean that's almost like a product in itself. So I think how was that as in terms of development? What's the response been that you've seen from that product?
So, well, the response has been really, really positive, and it's really driven adoption of Nuke 13 into productions, where Nuke 13 is the move to Python 3, so it was always going to be a hard one for studios to move to, but Copycat has really gotten a lot of use already. Back from when it was in beta, people were using it to process images, which is really exciting. And I think Copycat is really great. It's one of the features that we've made since I've been at Foundry that I'm most proud of in Nuke, because it's a case where you're taking this powerful kind of nascent technology in machine learning that has so much potential to transform visual effects and image processing and just our lives in general. But it's also hard, right? It's a hard one to apply, because the kind of quality and scale that you work in VFX is different than the kind of broad machine learning models that might exist out there. The way Google may process your photos, right? In Google Photos is a bit different. But with Copycat, we've been able to take, the kind of bones of machine learning, where it says, I give you, you give it some reference of, I want to turn this image into this image, and then it goes away and trains how to do that and can apply that. But it does it in a kind of artist focused context, right? We put it inside Nuke, which makes it available to the artists to make their models, to tweak them, to really develop these tools themselves. It's not a machine learning tool that replaces the artist. And I think it's very much in line with, the what we say was always the goal with Nuke, right? Which is about giving the artists technical and creative control by, putting the technology into their hands, right? And not hiding it away.
But machine learning has a sort of inherent, it hides things. I mean, like I've seen, like, I know an artist who's using it a lot, and what's interesting is, what you can do is mostly you give it another example, right? So you can do a lot of simple shots, like where you're doing something to people's eyes or screen replacements. You can kind of just give it an example, and then let it do other ones, but then if you want to tweak them, rather than how you might in a traditional Nuke way of adjusting keyframes or adjusting a slider somewhere, what you'll actually do is you'll do another frame or even another shot, and then feed that into the model and then run it again and see and sort of improve it in that way. So it's almost more like teaching a junior artist than
Yes. Yeah, it is, right? I mean, you're right. It is a bit black boxy, right? Like the models work, but you don't necessarily know what they do, and you can't control what they're doing right there. It's a training a junior artist that has a robot brain instead of a human one. You can't say, make it feel a bit more fun. They're like, nah, I don't get it. So um, you do have to, it is a paradigm shift, right, in terms of the way you think about solving problems. Because yeah, you're right. In Nuke, you add all the nodes, right? You set all the operations you want to do, and you refine the parameters. And in this case, it's a bit of the opposite. Like you're working from the output, and you need to decide, what are the other reference frames I need to give it. Am I giving it too much information? Am I telling it to look at the wrong part of the image? It's a bit of a different paradigm.
But you do think of a lot of cases. I mean, when we were on Good Omens a few years ago, I mean, it was a couple of years ago now, but David Tennant's contact lenses kept rotating while he was just acting. And so, it was a pretty easy fix in Nuke to track it, stabilize it, turn it around and match move it again. But of course, it was just a lot of them because it was every single shot where he's wearing these contact lenses, which is pretty much every shot in the show. So you do think, we could have done that and you would just, I guess, do examples in different lighting conditions and do that. But are you also training models at Foundry that there are things that I guess everyone's doing, like,
Yeah.
upresing, degraining, regraining? Like there's certain like lens distortion. There's certain boring things that everyone has to do in every shot, and you think, that's what you kind of want the machines to do, all the boring stuff, like in a way. Leave
Yeah,
us the cool stuff.
definitely. So, I mean, yes. So in Nuke 13, there are two tools that we shipped that we trained at Foundry. One is the deblurred node, which is pretty cool. I mean, it's something that you couldn't do before machine learning, right? To remove motion blur from video. And upres is the other one. So upscale is the node that we released, which does some quite nice upscaling as an alternative to the TVI scale node. But the challenges we found is that, well, these things all really require the GPU and a quite powerful GPU. So it's not always accessible to really work performantly in a lot of hardware that VFX artists are using. And the other big challenge is the access to the data, because Foundry, we're not making movies, right? Like we're not generating tons of high quality production data that we can use for training. And we while we may have done tests on like client footage or in partnership with different companies, we only want to release tools that there's no question about ownership of that data and where it's come from.
Are you looking at ways to anonymize data so you can, for example, it could be the data was generated on an NDA movie, a non-disclosure agreement movie, but you're kind of going, this data is just like how you remove blinks when someone fires a gun, for example, and it's not going to be anything that is specific to that movie. Of course, if it was like how to make Thor's hammer have lightning on it, then that would be inherently, you wouldn't want a tool that just does that, because that would inherently be like a Marvel thing. But there are a lot of things that we just do all the time, right? Like wire removals, screen replacements, blah blah blah, that are just, they're really basic, and we do thousands of them.
Yeah, I think it's a really tricky one, and hopefully it's something that will be easier to enable in the future as the industry gets more used to machine learning and what it can do, and how it's used. But it's a real tricky one, because who owns the data? Like a great example is rotoshapes, right? So if everyone's rotoing people are the same, whether it's Scarlett Johansson or, I don't know, someone else, George Clooney, right? They're still generally people. So you think, the rotoshape is rotoshape, but in the end, like, the rotoshape is outlining an object and an image. Who actually owns the image? Who owns the shape of that object? It starts to get more complicated from an IP standpoint. But hopefully, one in the future that we can get to that place where studios and really the people that own the IP are comfortable with anonymizing the data. But along those lines, we do have something that's quite exciting coming in the next release of Nuke, which is expanding the inference node, which is the sister node to Copycat, the one you use to apply the models within a Nuke script. That one, we're opening up the ability to use models that were trained outside of Nuke. So you can use open source PyTorch models that are generated in the community inside Nuke. That also, I can also see potential in the future where, if you imagine on like Nukepedia, people can train their copycat models. If it's their data, they're comfortable sharing it, they can contribute that back to the community. Someone can pick it up, add more to it. Like you said, screen replacements. Could be like, this is my model I made for a screen replacement in the shot. Someone could say, great, I took that, I added a few more frames for my show to it, and now it's an even better model for that, and so forth. Like, we can get a community of these things, which are really just more Nuke tools, right? You can apply to different images and different Nuke scripts.
No, but I think that's it, because you can already share a cat file. Is he a dog? Cat?
Cat, yes, .cat. I know we're extra clever with this one.
It's a good name. It's a really good name as well. Like, I think that was quite well done, whoever came up with the name.
Oh, that was our research team. Ben Kent, he gets the credit for that.
Well done. So now you are expanding to all the products. So having become the lord of the mistress of Nuke, you are now all the products of Foundry. And
yes.
What does this mean? What have you had to learn? What's the most exciting tool that isn't Nuke that you're working on?
Oh, you're gonna make me choose between them. All my other product
Between
teams
your
are gonna be
children.
jealous. Yeah, I mean, I'm really quite excited about all of them. They all have their kind of unique strengths and their unique challenges. I think, well, we already talked about colorway. I think that has a lot of potential. I think Flix has a lot of, untapped potential that we can develop for um, storyboarding, and not just storyboarding, but previs and other kind of review applications in the future. But of course, like Katana and Mari are also really exciting. They're used in a lot of pipelines with Nuke. Actually, it's 100% overlap between those tools and Nuke.
Yeah.
So I think it's quite exciting to be thinking across them, especially at a time where we are looking at how we can implement, within Foundry and, across the industry, workflows around USD, better interop, the user experience piece you already mentioned. I think there's a lot of kind of cross products potential we've not taken advantage of yet. And yeah, go ahead.
Because, so, I mean, I guess if you take the example of Adobe, one thing that Adobe does do well is that I don't actually use any Adobe products. I'm not saying that because you're here. I just have like lost like contact with them. But one thing
Yeah.
they do very well is they have their softwares are similar enough that even if they're quite different, like Illustrator and After Effects, that if you know one of them, you can very quickly learn another. And are you doing a similar thing with Nuke and, for example, Katana or Mari to go like, if you're a Nuke user, you should be able to learn Katana, in half the time of someone that's never used Nuke? Or are you sort of thinking along those lines as well? Is that a part of your strategy or?
Yeah. Well, I mean, because our tools are so, they are specific and niche and designed for a specific job, I think it's unlikely we'll ever get to a point that's so much like the Adobe suite where you can really move between them. I think it's, you know, I think that's unlikely because, it doesn't always make sense for a lighter to think the same way a compositor does and vice versa. But I do think we can have, that we talked about ease of data exchange between them, consistency in the things that should be consistent, and that kind of trust, right? That the work you do in Katana is going to carry over perfectly to Nuke, but not in a way that requires us to make, bespoke formats or locks that we couldn't build with other software. So always built around open standards. Um, yeah, I think our approach is likely to be around that, like the how we implement standards consistently and how we can have more experience sharing when it makes sense.
And are there tools? I mean, like, for example, there are tools that like Mocha and Silhouette that are not rivals at all. But they complement something within a particular feature within Nuke. So, for example, Mocha, you can export Nuke roller shapes and trackers and spline warps and things like that. So, do you what is your relationship to those companies that produce software that or things like the Keen tools, which is getting used a lot. I mean, this is a brilliant plugin, and it's like something I didn't even think you could do in Nuke. But so how do you work with those kind of companies?
Yeah, so well, those particular ones, so Boris Effects and Keen Tools, we do work with them quite a lot because, of course, we want them to maintain compatibility with Nuke. And really, for me, like I think it's a great thing, right? If someone is building tools that add to the tool set of Nuke that we can never build, like everything that they've built. So it's really great to have that available in Nuke. It's a huge win for us. And so, yeah, we do a lot of collaboration with them on making sure that our tools are going to stay up to date. They're going to work well together. If there's any blocks, to what they're doing that, we can resolve in Nuke for them. We're always talking to developers about those kind of things. So yeah, and also to get feedback from, to hear their feedback, right, from the requests they get about Nuke or how their tools are being used, because our customer base may be the same, but the tools are used in different ways in different segments of the market. And a plugin manufacturer, they may have more insight from um, smaller studios, or in cases like Vortex, who make Eddy, it's a specific use case, right, for simulations in Nuke. And so, the customers that use those, like when we talk to them, it may be about Nuke proper, not about this highly scaled 3D aspect of Nuke. And yeah, so we get a lot of insight from them and share a lot of feedback, in both directions.
Oh, that's really cool. And to a certain extent, most of your customers are building tools, right? Because I mean, if you think of Nuke, and I guess Katana as well. I'm not a Katana user, so I'm kind of guessing here, but almost no one uses it out of the box as the way when you download Nuke and you install it. That's not how it is in any facility.
Yes.
There's all sorts of tools that are built around it, and obviously the scripting connection with Python, and you obviously have Blink script, and there's still TCL somewhere, but those capabilities are quite extensive, and
Mm-hmm.
they are used a lot, and so at some point when you're looking at bugs and new features, I mean, sometimes I guess some companies already have those features because they've made them themselves. But do you, what's your relationship with that kind of aspect of your
Yeah.
software being extended by the user base?
Yeah, no, definitely. It's very true, right? Nuke is highly customized and extended and integrated in a lot of different ways. And yeah, it's a strength, right? In a lot of ways because people are taking advantage, right, of the Python API and the C++ SDK and all those things to extend what you can do in Nuke. Also great, right? Because you're getting more value than Foundry could build for you. But it does pose some challenges around really the kind of frequency of updates we do, or how many big like API changing updates we make, because of course, every time we upgrade core libraries or make a big change to the SDK, it means you need to change your tools and update them.
So,
So
for example, we did Python 3.
yeah, so like Python 3, Qt5, or even things like in Nuke, was it 11.2, we updated the deep API to be more performant. But if you had your own deep tools, which a lot of studios do, you needed to move them to this new API. And it may not be a lot of work, but it's another development project they have to plan for. And so it's one more bit that we need to consider in our kind of roadmaps and our planning is, when do we make these changes? How do we, be confident in them? And we do, of course, we talk to our customers a lot, especially the larger studios that have a lot of these customizations around just that. Like if we make a change and it means you're going to have to update all your 3D tools, when is a good time for that? What are the benefits you need to see to make that worthwhile? Are you willing to do it? That kind of thing. And I mean, sometimes it means that we can't move as fast as smaller studios or those that don't adhere to the VFX reference platform would like us to, because we kind of need to move the whole industry at once to different standards.
And I guess the flip side of that, the smaller studios, they when they don't have pipeline developers, do they? I mean, is there a demand for like a pipeline in a box to just like I just want to download Nuke, install it, and have it do auto writes and a lot of these things that I'm used to. I mean, even like some of the things that I've seen you've added to Nuke, like the fact that a rotor shape defaults to alpha, that a frame hold defaults to the frame that you're on, which everyone scripted themselves because nobody used them the way the software managed them. But is there more of a demand for to just like I don't want to write my own. I bought a software. I don't want to write my own software to use your software. I mean, from especially Nuke indie users, perhaps, or
Yes, well, definitely. And I think actually in general, right, there's still this appetite for integrations, right, and studios building integrations, but less so for building lots of custom tools on top of things. Right? Everyone wants to kind of focus their R&D efforts in different places, not building a lot of plugins anymore. And so there is more of this demand for more plugins and for more of those kind of quality of life things you mentioned, like the updates to the frame hold, to be just in the product. And that's part of the reason why we have a bit of an effort around this at the moment, to make these little bit impactful changes. So a little relatively small, still take work to make, of course, relatively small but impactful updates. We have, you know, not as much demand for the build the pipeline for me aspect, but I think right now there's the integrations with shop management tools like ShopGrid and FTrack have become so good that if you can use those, if you have something like that in your pipeline and you attach Nuke to it, it can make it quite easy to get up and running and still have a level of sophistication and management of what's happening on a project.
that's really cool. So I guess as we're sort of coming towards the end, I've got two questions for you, but this is one of them. One, what do you think are the most exciting things you see coming in the next few years within VFX and the product lines that you're running?
Yeah, well, definitely USD workflows. I think that's really exciting. And on the 3D side, right, it's already here, right, between Maya and Houdini and Katana, right? They've been working with USD for a long time, but now that's coming into, compositing and Nuke and tools in other areas of the pipeline. And I think that's quite exciting towards that, promise of USD that we talked about enabling collaboration and this kind of non-linear way of working where you can go back and forth. I think that's really exciting. I think, well, definitely real time in terms of accelerating, ways of working and adding more collaboration. I think there's a lot of potential from that just in the industry overall. It's really exciting. So, and again, machine learning, like we already talked about, I think we're just scratching the surface about what we can do with machine learning and do it in a way that accelerates and enables artists rather than, you know, the auto comp AI, because no one really wants that, right? We certainly don't want that. So I think it's quite exciting times though for all those tools and what that means for artists or in teams in terms of collaboration and new ways of working that may have not existed before.
So, uh, I would also like to finish with, if someone wants to move into product management, whether they're coming from outside the industry like yourself, or whether they're coming from an artist role and they want to move into a more product involved role, what are your tips and sort of do's and don'ts regarding that?
Yeah, so I would say for anyone that's in VFX or animation, I'd say, to when you think about your career and you think about the opportunities, to think broadly. Because when I think about a lot of the team at Foundry that came from production, they get to come work in software. They have honestly quite a nice work life, quality of life balance. um, but also then get to have a real impact across the whole industry, right? You're not working in one studio on one show, you're really touching them all. And I think that's quite exciting. So really, if you're someone that has knowledge of Nuke, Maya, Katana, Mari, anything, you have a lot more career options, right, than working only in a studio. And yeah, definitely, whether that's product management or other things, there's a lot of job opportunities out there in the kind of technology space. So consider those. And then for product management in particular, really, the main skills and things to build is thinking strategically. So kind of the theme of what we talked about, the questions that you asked about how do you balance priorities from different studios? How do you manage the timing of, X feature before Y feature? How do you figure out how to price or package products? All of that is really comes down to going around, being really good at listening, being really good at connecting the dots and kind of making pragmatic decisions. And I think you can build those skills in so many places, whether that's um, in other jobs that you're doing or just in your life in general, right? Planning projects or trying to accomplish something, especially if it's creative, you're going to build all those product skills that you can then leverage to move into product management.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, thank you so much for your having you coming on the show this evening, and I'm sure there'll be lots of sort of questions on the comments and forums, but we'll be looking forward to keeping in touch with you. Where can people find out more about you and about Foundry in general?
Yeah, so Foundry, it's simple, www.foundry.com. Not the Foundry, just Foundry. You can find us there. And of course, we're on social media, so Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn as the Foundry team. So yeah, if you follow us on those channels, lots of great updates about the products and what's coming. But whenever we do, case studies or talk to artists in the industry, all of that gets shared up there. So lots of good places to learn. And of course, I'm on LinkedIn. Anyone can come find me. I love to talk to artists or other people in the industry. So definitely reach out.
Brilliant. Okay. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.